Hey everybody, Jimmy Smith back to do my post-fight breakdown. UFC on ESPN, Blanchfield versus Fiorot. My picks were not good at all. But we'll go over them and all the controversy and weirdness. Really weird card. A lot of bad stuff, strange stuff going on the entire time. We'll go over all of it. First, though, we start out with the main card, Chiy and Jukani, Reese McKee. I took Chiy and Jukani in this one. What I saw the whole time, not a particularly interesting fight, not a very good fight. Chiy was doing enough to keep Reese McKee off of him. Right? He has a good low kick. He has good straight punches. He's tall. He's rangy. But what he's had in previous fights is power. And he didn't have that in this fight. He seemed content to kind of keep Reese McKee at a distance. He didn't seem to have the confidence that he could put him down or put him out even when he had him hurt. So what we got was kind of a game of keep away with Jukani. Not that he was running necessarily, but he was trying to keep Reese McKee at a distance, wouldn't throw a lot of power punches, and even when he'd land them, he wouldn't necessarily follow up with any combinations. And Reese McKee did enough to stay in the fight, use some footwork to get in close. We'll discuss people who didn't do that later on in the card. But Reese McKee able to stay in his face enough to make a fight out of it. That's why it was a split decision, close fight. But Chiy and Jukani winning by decision over Reese McKee in a lackluster fight that didn't show a whole lot out of either guy. It seemed to me like Chiy and Jukani has hit a rough patch in the UFC, and he hasn't regained the confidence in his power yet. Still has range, no confidence in his power throughout that fight. Kyle Nelson, Bill Algeo. Picked Bill Algeo in this one. He's a 2-1 favorite. Kyle Nelson hurt him and then never let him off the hook. Finished him 4 minutes of round number one. Look, credit the heart and the chin of Bill Algeo. When we talk about heart and chin, here's the code and commentary. You're losing. And Bill Algeo got hit, got hurt, and Kyle Nelson just unloaded with power punches. Never dropped him. He was able to stay on his feet. I do think Gary Copeland, the referee, made the right choice. Bill Algeo was just eating power punch after power punch. Not clean, not beautiful, but strong, right? But aggressive. You can always hurt somebody. You always finish somebody when you have them hurt. It's easy. Just keep doing what you've been doing. It doesn't take a lot of technique. And that's exactly what Kyle Nelson did over Bill Algeo in a short fight that was one-sided. So, Nursultan Ruziboev versus Cedric Duma. This is the first controversial one of the night, unless you consider the Bill Algeo stoppage controversial, which I do not. So what happened is Ruziboev, who is 6'5", 185 pounds. The only taller one I can think of was Kendall Grove. Back in the day, I think he was 6'6", a really tall Hawaiian fighter in the middleweight division. Incredibly tall. Now, Duma is 6'2". He's used to at least being tall for 185, if not really gigantic. And Ruziboev towered over him, 3 inches on him. And as the fight progressed, we saw good power punches from Ruziboev. Landed a straight right hand right off the bat that hurt Duma. Good power punches, good patience. He's a veteran guy, has 45 pro fights or something like that. So he's been through a lot. We saw veteran poise, we saw good power. But as soon as Duma started doing well with his punches, finally had a combination that did something, he took a poke to the eye and doesn't just go turn to the ref or anything. He turns away completely from Ruziboev, tries to fix his eye. The referee doesn't say, stop, you got to keep going. And Ruziboev's not going to stop, went right after him, knocked him down, and finished him after an eye poke. Now, we'll get into, of course, the Chris Weidman eye pokes, plural. But in this one, this is more on Duma than Ruziboev. It was an eye poke, unintentional, but if you're Duma, you cannot just go, hey, stop, and turn away unless the referee tells you. And if you turn, you got to turn to the referee and let them know. If they go, hey, I didn't see it, you got to keep going, you got to keep going. This is just professionalism, right? If in the NFL, you don't hear a whistle, you keep running. You go after the ball. That's a fumble. Referee didn't blow it dead, you got to keep going. And there's a similar kind of thing in fighting where, yeah, you may have gotten poked, you may have gotten hit in the crotch, whatever it is, illegal, anything. Referee doesn't say stop, defend yourself at all times. You have to do that. Now, Weidman situation, a little different. I'll get into that in a minute. That's right. Chris Weidman, Bruno Silva. So despite what you think of the last fight, over by TKO, 3 minutes, 18 seconds in round number one. I picked Ruziboev to win, so I'm 2-1 right now. Chris Weidman, Bruno Silva. Before I get into the eye pokes or anything like that, the good news, if you're a Chris Weidman fan, it didn't look like his body had given up on him. In the last fight against Brad Tavares, he looked like a semi-truck going down the highway with no tires. Just throwing sparks on the rims, trying to get to the finish line, and his body just wasn't there. This time around, Chris Weidman's body looks like it can keep up at the mid-level at best, right? So there was that. Tactically, he didn't look like the Chris Weidman of old. There weren't even like really flashes of the Chris Weidman of old. He just looked like a average-ish 185-pound fighter. That's what he looked like, which is way better than he's looked in previous fights. So his body looked better. He looked like a serviceable 185er. There weren't a lot of, wow, this guy was a former champion. You didn't see that at all. And he won the first round against Bruno Silva, but there were eye pokes, multiples. And I really believe the referee, who was Gary Copeland, we used to call him Mini Brock when I was doing Bellator. He looked like a little tiny Brock Lesnar. And the referee, I didn't think handled it well, because even between the eye pokes, after the first one, Weidman is still doing this. And the ref doesn't go, timeout. Stop that. You have to, hey, cut it out. He didn't stop the behavior that was leading to the fouls in the first place. Even before the foul that ended the fight, there were 2 eye pokes before that. And the ref, didn't admonish Chris strongly enough. And in between, when the behavior was still there, meaning this, he never said, hey, stop that. And a lot of referees will tell you, and of course Bruno Silva said this after the fight, the first warning's in the locker room. A lot of referees have no problem taking away a point for the first eye poke, because I told you in the locker room, you cannot stick your fingers out. And apparently Gary Copeland did that to both fighters in the locker room. Hey, got to hold your hands a certain way. You can't point them. He pointed them the whole time. So you had 2 fouls already. Now, balance this out. 2 fouls, but Chris did win the first 2 rounds. So you got to kind of take those into account when talking about the end and the unfairness of it all, and it does suck, but he was winning the fight. But the last sequence, Bruno Silva lands some good straight punches. He's coming in and gets a finger jammed all the way into his eye really badly. Now, most people who are watching this right now, unless you're a grappler, you've been a fighter before, you've never experienced what that's like, and it's awful. There's no reason in normal life, unless you're getting to dirty street fights with people all the time, that you're getting a finger jammed into your eye. It is awful. And so the people saying, and Chris Weidman saying, oh, the guy folded up and, you don't do that with an eye poke. Yeah, you do, on a bad one. And remember, this is a third one that we've seen, and it was bad. And on the replay, you see he gets jammed in the eye. He turns and blinks, and he gets scraped in the other eye too. And he turns, and the left hook, the check left that we thought in real time caused the knockdown, really didn't do much. It kind of grazed him. He's already going down from the eye poke. You can't see. So Chris Weidman celebrating all this stuff. It wouldn't surprise me if this is looked at. New Jersey, New York, they do have a really strong athletic commission. It's very, very good, that this doesn't get turned to a no contest, because it was the cause of the knockdown. It wasn't it happened while he was getting knocked down or something like that. It was the cause of him going down, because he was on his way down before the punch landed. They might overturn this one and call it a no contest. Chris Weidman also, to borrow a pro wrestling term, there are faces and heels in MMA, good guys and bad guys. Chris Weidman has always been a good guy. And him kind of not even saying, like, we can run it back, even paying lip service to, okay, maybe the eye pokes had something to do with it. Hey, we should run it back. He's kind of leaning into he wanted out and all this stuff. Yeah, he was losing the fight. He wasn't losing that bad. I haven't looked at the scorecards, but, I thought Weidman won the first 2 rounds. Not by a ton, but, he wasn't getting shellacked and getting hurt and going, man, I need to get out of here. I've seen that before. This was not that case at all. He was still in the fight, right? A hard third round, and he could maybe turn this one around and get a finish, because he was being aggressive and he was landing good punches. So there's all the controversy together. How it gets resolved, I don't know. But to hear Chris Weidman kind of, he wanted out and kind of play the heel a little bit, it's a little weird. You're at the end of your career. You've been a face the whole time. I wouldn't start playing that role. I would kind of stay with the, hey, I'll give the guy a rematch, whatever, and I'll beat him again in front of my hometown crowd, whatever it is. If you're a fan of Chris Weidman, the good news is he didn't look completely shot The bad news is he looked just good enough to continue going. I don't think he's an elite middleweight anymore. I don't think he rises a lot higher than the Bruno Silvas of the world. And remember, this was kind of as I said in my picks, Bruno, they could give him much worse guys than Bruno Silva. They're kind of giving him a solid in Atlantic City. I don't know how often they're going to do that. So if you're a fan of Chris Weidman, it's a double-edged sword. He looked good enough to continue. I don't think you want him to continue. But he does get the win by TKO. For now, they might overturn that one. Joaquin Buckley over Vicente Luque. I thought it was performance of the night was Joaquin Buckley. I thought he looked fantastic. I thought Vicente Luque looked worse than he's ever looked, which sucks, but it's true. Joaquin Buckley looked better than he's ever looked. Vicente Luque looked worse than he's ever looked. As I said about Chiy and Jukani, it seemed like Vicente Luque was doing just enough to keep his opponent at bay. And you're not going to beat the Joaquin Buckleys of the world doing that. And what do I mean by that? Young, hungry guys who are explosive, who are physical, who are strong. And what I mean by young, he's not that young. I mean young at the elite level, right? Who wants to break through and is super hungry. You're not going to just keep him off you. With a jab and a 1-2 and a lazy reaching takedown every now and then, that's not going to be enough to keep him off you. And the ending sequence of this fight was bizarre, which is crappy takedown, pulls half guard, and then gets pounded out. Like, all right, if you pull half guard, you better be Gilbert Burns, Jacare, you better have a world title, Damian Maia. All right, you better be somebody like that and you're going to pull half guard in modern MMA. And even for those guys, it's not smart. But I'm saying, all right, at least with them, I go, okay, maybe they have a plan in mind. This was pulling a guy on top of you and then getting beat up. In a fight that he was, once again, losing. All right, it wasn't completely out of hand. We're like, okay, I want out of here, and you're going to find a way out. I just didn't get the logic of any of it. Joaquin Buckley was powerful. He was angling well. He was punching well. He was using good combinations. He looked like a top 10 welterweight who might do something in the division. Vicente Luque looked like a spent force to me. And this is one of those where I'm like, I don't see him. We're number 11 right now in the rankings. Maybe out of the top 15. I just don't see him getting back in there necessarily. Joaquin Buckley looked really solid, but I'm sitting here right now, a day later, trying to figure out what he was doing, pulling half guard, and I don't understand it at all. In modern MMA, that's almost an impossible position to be in, and especially Vicente Luque is not a submission wizard by any stretch of the imagination. So it was a bizarre ending to a fight that was really good for Joaquin Buckley. He looked great, looked like a top 10 guy. So going into the main event, the way I called it, I called Erin Blanchfield for this one. I thought fast starter versus slow starter in a 5-round fight, Erin Blanchfield will be able to make her takedown and her ground game and her physical pressure, essentially, a factor in this fight. It was a non-factor the entire time. What I saw was Manon Fiorot working on the outside, which I expected her to, having good footwork, which I expected her to, and being accurate with the strikes. Like, this wasn't, oh my God, that's an amazing Manon Fiorot. She looked like I thought she would look. I just thought Erin Blanchfield would have a few more tricks in her bag to get this fight to the ground, not even early, but late, or as she did her last fight before this. Erin Blanchfield fought mostly a stand-up battle with Talia Santos, and, I thought she counted herself pretty well. In this fight, she was on the outside getting picked apart the entire time. Now, what she did do that, for example, Marlon Chito Vera didn't do against Sugar Sean O'Malley, at the end of, I think it was round 2, she did hit the F it button and went, okay, man, I got to get in here and do something. But she didn't have the tactical skills to really get inside. She tried. You could tell she was making an effort out of it and trying to get in there, and she wasn't sitting there, losing rounds, and I'm going, what are you doing? She was trying to get in. But getting inside in kickboxing takes footwork and feints and versatility and mobility and head movement, and she didn't have all those things. And they're really difficult to master in kickboxing and MMA. It's really difficult to be able to kind of bob and weave and move and get inside on somebody who wants to keep you on the outside. It's not easy for professional boxers and kickboxers to do, let alone mixed martial artists. So usually generally competent kickboxers at best. And she just didn't have that. I didn't see that combination of, her head movement was kind of here rather than fluid and on the shoulder and stuff like that. And she wasn't throwing feints to get Fiorot to bite and then come in between those. No real commitment to the takedown. Even when she got underhooks a couple times, it was no, okay, shuck them, get underneath and hit the double leg. So I saw somebody who does have a really good ground game, who has basic kickboxing, but you could see against an opponent that is good at playing the outside. She didn't have everything to put it all together seamlessly, the way top-level professionals do, the way, the Valentina Shevchenkos and the Alexa Grassos do, right? The timing is good. Not just the takedown, the timing on the takedown, right? Not just the strikes, the fluidity of the strikes and the head movement and the defense and the offense all working together. The pieces weren't quite there for Erin Blanchfield against Menin Fiorot. Fiorot looked like the more complete fighter in this one. So, anyway, 2-4 on the night. Wouldn't surprise me if Chris Weidman one gets overturned, but interesting, odd, weird night of fights. But I'll be here before the next one. Please give it a like, give it a subscribe. Talk to you later.